Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Together, they form what's known as the Brics nations. The acronym was originally coined at the start of the new millennium. It referenced the 4 emerging markets demonstrating rapid growth and vast economic potential. When South Africa joined in 2010, the S was added to the grouping.
BRICS state leaders are gathering for the 11th summit. This year's meeting is seen to usher in a second golden decade for more cooperation among the 5 emerging markets. BRICS members are expected to reaffirm support for multilateralism and partnerships.
Although there is no common political or security charter or funds to finance its activities, the countries are making more concerted efforts to enhance partnerships in a variety of areas, from global governance to trade.
Embracing the second golden decade. After the past years, the emerging market bloc, BRICS, has grown into a major force in the global economy and a voice in international affairs. In 2018, BRICS accounted for about 24% of the world GDP and 16% of global trade.
So we are going to make some comments about strengthening and reforming multilateralism. It includes the UN, the IMF, the Security Council, the WTO.
And there was some talk about reform of the World Trade Organization, the WTO. As you're fully aware, Mike, the WTO, in some respects, has been at the center of the dispute, the trade dispute between the United States and China.
And this year, the focus is on an innovative future. At last year's summit in South Africa, BRICS nations agreed to build a partnership for a new industrial revolution, tapping into the potential of areas such as the digital economy and smart manufacturing.
We, BRIC countries, we are going to send out a strong message to the international community that we are defending strongly the multilateral system, a more open, free, fair international trade system. So I think that will be a very strong message this summit will deliver to the international community.
After the abrupt cancellation of the APEC summit in Chile, the BRICS summit has become a more essential platform for multilateralism. BRICS nations have to carry the torch of free trade. All eyes are on how far these countries will work together in pushing for their common agenda in the international arena.
So in the previous 2015 BRICS summit held at Ufa, Russia, there was a decision towards creation of a multilateral development bank called as a New Development Bank. The role of this bank is to support public or private projects through loans, guarantees, equity, participation, and other financial instruments. This idea was proposed by India during the 4th BRICS summit, and it became a reality in the 7th BRICS summit. There's more work that needs to be put in, like the bank will now allow new members to join in order to increase the share of capital. So many of important decisions need to be implemented.
But of course, this is always about trade, banking, money, all of that. Where did that come down?
Yeah, a big focus. You mentioned banking, a big focus on the BRICS Development Bank. This is the finance arm, also known as the New Development Bank, the finance arm of BRICS. You know, these are developing countries. They're looking for finance to build their economies, to build infrastructure and things like this. Now, the bank has been coming under some criticism. It's been criticized for being too slow, for not making loans fast enough. It's also been criticized on transparency issues. And one other criticism is that it issues loans in the US dollar denomination, which leaves countries, developing countries, open to currency risk. But the president of the bank, KV Kamath, he was here and he tried to reassure people that the bank was getting on the right track right now. In fact, he talked about opening the bank's membership to other countries. He said, look, all United Nations countries should be eligible for membership in this BRICS bank. That is something which, of course, the leaders will be considering. They want to increase the loan book or the capital that the bank has right now.
I'm honored to report to you on the progress made by the New Development Bank since it began operations 4 years ago. A strong foundation for the bank has been built, and the bank is now reaching a steady state of operations. Thus far, the NDB has approved 46 projects for a total of US dollars 12.8 billion in our member countries. By the end of this year, we expect approvals to reach about US dollars 15 billion. In 2020, we are targeting approvals of between $8 to 10 billion. We expect to make our first 2 equity investments in Brazil and India this year. We are measuring the impact of our work through our contributions to the achievement of sustainable development goals that our members have committed to. I believe the adoption of these innovations can help the bank grow to a size of nearly $75 billion, with the initial $10 billion of capital that was paid in by the founding members. This would place the bank in the top tier of multilateral development banks globally.
Let me just say that we have it under control. We're watching it very carefully, and we're going to be very, very. We're watching it very carefully, including other countries that may or may not be playing games. We're watching it very closely.
But you know, if Russia is talking with USA or Guaido, what can you tell about us?
Just put this in the back of your mind. It's all going to be fine. We know everything that you said, and it's all going to be fine. We're very much involved. We very much know what's going on, and we're very much involved. Okay?
Today, President Trump welcomed Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro for an official visit to the White House. Bolsonaro has been dubbed the Trump of the tropics because of the rhetoric and policies the two leaders share. As Nick Schifrin reports, the two presidents are now trying to overcome more than 3 decades of Brazilian suspicion of the United States.
We're going to exchange jerseys.
Today at the White House, the leaders of the Western Hemisphere's 2 largest economies declared themselves on the same team and allied in a new North-South American axis.
We're going to have a fantastic working relationship. We have many views that are similar.
Brazil and the United States stand side by side in their efforts to ensure liberties, respect for the traditional family, respect for God, our Creator, against gender ideology and political correctness, and against fake news.
Jair Bolsonaro is the first unabashedly pro-American Brazilian president since the end of military rule in the 1980s, and made the U.S. his first bilateral foreign visit.
It is time to overcome old resistance and explore the very best potential that is there between Brazil and the U.S. After all, it is fair to say, today, Brazil has a president who is not anti-American, which is really unprecedented in the last few decades.
The Trump administration considers Bolsonaro a key conservative ally, especially on Venezuela, as the U.S. tries to oust President Nicolás Maduro. Maduro was propped up by his military, and the U.S. is trying to convince that military to give him up by using the Brazilian military as an interlocutor. As part of today's visit, Brazil agreed to open a military base to U.S. satellites. The two sides are increasing trade agreements, and the U.S. labeled Brazil a major non-NATO ally. But those agreements were less important than what was said, argues America's quarterly editor-in-chief, Brian Winter.
In Bolsonaro, you really have, there's really no other leader anywhere in the world who has so openly tried to copy the Donald Trump model in terms of both substance and style. And that was really what both leaders wanted, was to a certain extent some validation.
Back home, supporters call Bolsonaro myth, a reference to the almost mythical status he achieved after surviving a campaign trail stabbing last September, and to his middle name, Messias. But President Trump is focusing on his personal connection with Bolsonaro, and the administration called today a historic step toward realigning 2 countries whose leaders' worldviews are themselves aligned.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's a great honor to be with President Putin, his representatives, my representative. We have many things to discuss, including trade and including some disarmament, some little protectionism, perhaps, in a very positive way. And we're going to discuss a lot of different things. We've had great meetings. We have a very, very good relationship. and we look forward to spending some very good time together. A lot of very positive things going to come out of the relationship. So, Vladimir, thank you very much. Thank you.
Speaking about having the ball in our court in Syria, President Trump has just mentioned that we've successfully concluded the World Football Cup. Speaking of the football, actually, Mr. President, I'll give this ball to you, and now the ball is in your court.
Мы видим, что происходит там до сих пор. Слава богу, нас теперь уже никто не обвиняет, что мы вмешиваемся в выборы в Соединенных Штатах. Теперь Украину обвиняют. Ну и пускай там разбираются между собой. Но вот этот фактор внутриполитической борьбы, он влияет, негативно влияет до сих пор на российско-американские отношения. Надеюсь, что это когда-то прекратится. Мы к этому готовы.
I am so thrilled to be here in the great state of Texas with one of America's greatest, most devoted, and most loyal friends, Prime Minister Modi of India. Thank you.
When I met him for the first time, he said to me, India has a true friend in White House. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my friend, a great American president, Mr. Donald Trump.
Minister Modi, I look forward to working with you to make our nations even more prosperous than ever before.
China's President Xi Jinping is not as vocal or social media obsessed as President Trump, but he's arguably the world's most powerful leader, and thanks to a recent end to term limits, he can now rule for life. Way before he was China's president, Xi Jinping couldn't even get into the Communist Party. He came from a well-off political family, but after his dad clashed with the party, he was turned away. As a teen, he lived in a remote village for several years, an experience some say helped him relate to Chinese citizens. He eventually joined the party, gradually moved up the ranks, and was appointed successor by party elders who thought he wouldn't shake things up. But that plan backfired. One of the signatures of his presidency has been a massive anti-corruption drive that punished nearly 300,000 politicians in 2016 alone. The corruption hunt has been both praised for its effectiveness and criticized as a ploy to root out Xi's political opponents.
这其中没有什么权力斗争，没有什么纸牌屋。
The Chinese are pulling out all the stops. They're going to have all the lavish dinners, the bilateral meeting with President Xi Jinping, all of the grandeur, the pomp and circumstance that you'd expect for any state visit. But they also said they're going to be adding some personal touches. So he's going to be taking a tour of the Forbidden City. There have been reports that he's going to be the first American president to actually be hosted by President Xi or by a Chinese president in the Forbidden City. So that is also another personal touch.
I guess the oldest culture, they say, is Egypt at 8,000.
埃及更古老一些，但是呢，文化没有断过流的，始终传承下来，只有中国。
So this is your original form, very much. Yeah, it really is.
对。
good. Yeah, thank you. And I'm greatly honored to host this lunch, to be joined by the leaders of Côte d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea, Nambia, Nigeria, Senegal, Uganda, and South Africa. In particular, I want to thank President Condé, who is representing the African Union. Thank you. Thank you. In this room, I see partners for promoting prosperity and peace on a range of economic, humanitarian, and security issues.
Well, South Africa is in a very difficult situation. I think you have to acknowledge that. We managed last year to get rid of a very bad president without a bullet being fired, and that's an achievement on this continent and in this globe, I think. And the president, I think, has had a long-term strategy, and he has made progress in certain areas. You have to acknowledge we're learning a great deal about corruption from the Zondo Commission. He has started the pushback on retrieving the institutions that the Zuma administration and the many corrupt people around that had infiltrated and essentially destroyed. We have new leadership at the South African Revenue Service. We have a new head of the National Prosecuting Authority who has to rebuild that institution.
6 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies are in Africa. Increasing American trade and investment across diverse industries, including agriculture, energy, transportation, healthcare, travel, and tourism, will further transform lives throughout the continent.
I don't know exactly what the president's plan is, but I think it's not clear we don't have a new economic strategy, which we desperately need, and that's why we certainly are very supportive of the thrust from the finance minister in this economic policy document he's just released. That is the kind of direction South Africa has to go. It's a bold set of recommendations which have been floating around in some respects for a while, but he's putting it on the table and he's saying, let's make some decisions.
Thank you for joining me for this critical discussion of the challenges and the opportunities facing our nations. Africa, I have to say, is a continent of tremendous, tremendous potential. The outlook is bright. I look forward to hearing from you and your advice during the meal. I thought rather than just eating, we'll have long discussions, and I look forward to that very much. But I also look forward to getting to know so many of you, and so many of you I do know, and it's an honor. It's an honor, and I really want to congratulate you. Growing very fast, economically and in every other way. You've done a terrific job. You've had some tremendous obstacles placed in your path, but you have done really an absolutely incredible job. So I want to thank you, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
It's interesting, you talk to analysts and they point to Bretton Woods and ushered in the stability, a new international monetary arrangement. And the U.S. was seen as this poster child of this. But now you see this chaos and in these speeches talking about protectionism, bullying. They're not naming names, but it's apparent who they're talking about. And in some cases, it looks like Brics is the model of stability. Let's listen to Vladimir Putin, what he had to say.
A consequence of this global recession is that we have witnessed the extensive use of unfair competition, unilateral sanctions, and protectionism is thriving. In such conditions, the BRICS countries have to undertake very serious efforts in order to ensure the development of our economies.
Anton, as you're well aware, a lot of people made fun of Brics initially. What do these people have in common? And yet, right now, they seem like the voice of reason. What do you make of that?
Well, Brics is a representation of a successful cooperation and between countries that had felt like they were outsiders to the Western world and the Bretton Woods system. In 2005, when the term was first coined, I don't think anyone would have expected us to be living through the 11th summit. So we just actually went through a summit that sort of summarized the past 10 years of cooperation. And these outsiders are really showing the whole world what a cooperative, mutually respectful relationship can yield. And it's not just about the bilateral agreements, but it's the new development bank, which is a real bank and is setting itself up as an alternative to the World Bank and other IMF specifically, other institutions. So you know, the up-and-coming nations are now beginning to determine the laws by which they are playing the geo-economic game. And so far, they seem to present a much more viable alternative that is inclusive and ready to accept new members in the future, compared to a lot of the protectionist measures that we see coming out of the United States.
As far as the currency devaluations, I've been complaining about that for a long time. And I believe that we will all eventually, and probably very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think, we will be all at a level playing field, because that's the only way it's fair. That's the only way that you can fairly compete in trade and other things. And we will be on that field, and we will all be working very hard to do great for our country. But it has to be fair, and we will make it fair. I think the United States is going to be an even bigger player than it is right now by a lot.
Yeah, look, remember we talked about the size of economies.
Yep.
Everything gets paid for. So think of how big the payment system is as big as the global economy, and maybe bigger than that because things multiply through the system. Parts of the world right now have digitized in payments, but I think the parts of the world that have digitized are the less or unregulated banking or payments markets where you can be in the payments business as a non-regulated or unregulated entity.
Like China?
Okay, like China. Like China would be a good place. In the more regulated markets, Europe and the United States, I think that the market will digitize and we will end up in a digital payment system, but it's going to look very much like a banking, highly regulated digital payment system. So you're going to need a digital payment system that has know your customer, anti-money laundering, it's going to have some type of audit trail, and it's going to have to really coincide with what the traditional banking laws are. But I think digital payments really is the future for everything we do.
Okay, but how is the current system going to be disrupted? Are they still going to be here in 2 years? Or is, you know, some of the ventures that you're working on going to just change and take over?
So there are many, many, many people in the payment space trying to disrupt it. Not all of them are going to survive. That I know for sure. Some major disruption will happen. There will be some winners and there will be some losers. I think the winners will be those that understand that Europe and the United States are going to look like a more regulated market than an unregulated market. So to the extent that you're playing with that in mind and you're building a platform, you're building technology that dovetails with the existing regulation, I think you've got a very good future ahead of you.
This is the de-dollarization of the global economy that is slowly creeping in. It's the inevitable consequence of the United States using economic and financial, specifically sanctions, against countries with which it disagrees. Once you start doing that and you start leveling these sanctions against many countries at the same time, it's inevitable that they will start looking for alternatives. So the dollar is still, you know, without doubt, is the dominant currency, but we're seeing the very beginning of a major change, which will be on a par with the tectonic geopolitical shift that we're living through in the world, with new nations staking a claim to, you know, formulating the rules of the global game. And in the financial world, we've got the same thing going on. And I don't think this is a trend that will really be reversed or stopped.